difficult circumstances. But my next speaker is an old friend who's been with me on this journey from the beginning. He is a leader in the Seventh-day Adventist Church on education issues. He was the head of one of the first Seventh-day Adventist schools in London here in Tottenham, but he's gone on to be a leader on the issue, and he's written a brilliant book called Education, A Pathway to Success for Black Children. I give you Dr. Keith Davidson.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Nice to see you. It's nice to be here again with this conference. The invitation you gave raised 5 issues. Number one, the impact of those educational changes on black children. 2, the damage of public sector cuts on resources available for the community, directly or indirectly beneficial to educational programs, such as supplementary schools, clubs, etc. Thirdly, the removal of black figures from the history curriculum. Fourthly, soaring exclusion. And finally, what will happen to underprivileged black children priced out of the higher education sector. I think that's the agenda you set up. I will not propose to cover all of that because colleagues here have covered a number of those issues. I want to talk about the proposal in terms of the GCSE program. And that would be relevant to many of you as teachers and some of you as parents and children. So the question here really is what is Mr. Gove proposing? I'll draw your attention to September last year. He did propose the abolition of the GCSE program. And you remember that? Yes, he proposed that. Then in February, he had a change of heart because there was a coalition of teachers, unions, and the regulators themselves of what the House of Commons committee itself had a report on it. And with that assembling of opposition to his proposed reform, he backed down in February, and he now has another scheme. I want to talk about that. What is he proposing then? He's proposing that there should be a reform of the existing GCSE program. So just to recap, he wanted was to abolish that and to replace it with the English baccalaureate program, which would mean a step up of the qualification bar. The argument really that they've been advancing for many years is that there's been a fall of standards. I would challenge that. There is no persuasive evidence to justify that position. What has been happening is that because more children are passing the current GCSE program, I'm not saying that there are problems with certain aspects, but the overall argument that there's been a fall in standard is not really true. Why am I saying that? The government, and it was the Labour government and others, to invested a lot in terms of teacher training, number one. The Conservatives themselves introduced the Ofsted program for monitoring and having more systematic inspection of schools. They invested too in the national curriculum. So putting all those things together, performance should improve and been improving. Not to the extent that we would like as a people because our children are not getting the results that we think they deserve. But the argument as stands have been fallen, not persuasive. If you want some more information, see me privately because I have a paper on that. Can't give you that here. So he was proposing to get rid of the GCSE program and to replace it with the EBAC, which would mean a tougher examination, to put it bluntly. And behind that is the belief that too many children have been passing. For us, the position basically is this. about 50% of all children will get the current measure, that is 5 GCSEs, A star to C, including English and Maths. So for all children, African Caribbean children, half are succeeding, another half not succeeding. So if you then look at the proposed changes, it would mean that in the long run, more of our children will fail if you raise the bar. Because I'll quote what he said. He said that I have therefore decided that the GCSE should be comprehensively reformed. He also went on to say that the reformed GCSE should remain universal qualifications of about the same size as they are currently and accessible with good teaching. At the level of what is widely considered to be a pass, currently indicated by a C grade, there must be increased demand to reflect the higher performing jurisdiction. In other words, he's saying that we're going to raise the bar, so to get a C, whatever it is you need to get a C, it'll become more difficult. Now, the impact of that will be that less children will pass. And that's behind the proposal. There's a belief, and the English education system has been, I would say, afflicted by a terrible disease called elitism. For centuries, there's that belief that only some children can succeed. I want to say that you should dispel that from your system, eradicate that from your system, because we actually believe it. That's why we talk about gifted and talented. I want to say to you that all children are gifted. And it's for us to be able to identify what they're good at. But all our children are capable intellectually. There's no situation where some can achieve academically and others not. And so back to elitism, it's been on the belief that only some can achieve. In fact, for centuries, the system was built around that concept. As they talk about 3 minds, the intellectual, the vocational, and the simple mind. And to mirror that philosophy, you have 3 types of schools too. That's why you have the grammar school and so forth, later on the secondary, modern, etc. So in the head is that belief. And although on paper there's a principle of education for all, in practice it is not the case. So where do we go with Mr. Gove and his proposal? I think, well, first let me say that the impact would be damaging for our children. That was the issue that you think you raised with us, Dan. I would suggest that there are 4 things that would adversely flow from this for our children. Number 1, more, as I said, will fail. Rather than the current 50%, more will fail. Number 2, there'll be less of our children going to university because the qualification will set you up for higher education. It stands to reason. Thirdly, in the long run, there'll be more for people unemployed. Because if you haven't got qualification, especially now, you'll be, even with qualification, you're vulnerable to unemployment. But it will be worse if you haven't got qualification. And finally, in the long run, it will affect and contribute to social exclusion in many areas. And so how should we respond? That's the question. I want to say to us that we need as a community to invest more in education ourselves. I'm preaching the gospel of self-determination. We can't always be sitting back and complaining and protesting that it should change. We have to get up and give leadership in the education of our children, self-determination. I put to you this morning that other communities are doing that. 70% of Jewish children are educated in their schools. That is a fact. Some of the schools are independent, some are maintained schools. But it's a principle I'm putting forward to you today, that we have to grab the horn, the bull by the horn, yes, and invest more. We have to make sacrifices and have more institutions for our children. I want to challenge groups and churches to do more to set up schools. We have Catholic schools, we have Church of England schools, we have Jewish schools, we have growing army of black churches. I say to our churches, we must set up schools for our children. We have to build a stronger network of social capital for children. In other words, support network for children. This is how the other side they do it. The children are well supported by resources. And so we need to step up in these areas. We need to put it bluntly, set up our own schools. And finally, I want to say to us, and Diane talked about my background as an Adventist. We believe that all children can achieve, every one of them. For the future, I put to you a little, if you're biblical, there's a story in the book of Daniel. His friends were studying, and it is recorded that they were found to be 10 times better than the others. My challenge to us is that we've got to get those institutions for ourselves, teach our children with our own teachers, for them to be 10 times better, because that's the only way for the future. Because with the economy and unemployment and so forth, competition will be very high. So we can't sit around and not educate our children. We need to be in the business, I summarize, to invest more ourselves, self-determination in our children. And I want to thank you for listening.